Hi, welcome back. We will finish our discussion of the major vertebrate groups by talking about the tetrapods. Fishes are the aquatic vertebrates. The tetrapods are the mostly terrestrial vertebrates. So we will be listing the adaptations that transition to life on land required, differentiating between amphibians and reptiles, explaining the significance of the amniotic egg, describing the distinguishing features of the amniotes, and identifying 4 features that separate mammals from other vertebrate groups. The tetrapods include the amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So one of their distinguishing traits is these 2 pairs of bony appendages that we discussed in the last lecture. Tetrapods are a descent group from the lobe-fin fishes. Remember, the lobe-fin fishes, one of the groups of bony fishes. And they're the ones that had the muscular fins supported by bones. And that gives them a lot of support in a terrestrial environment. But what advantages would there be in moving to land? It's a drier environment, there's much less support. Well, one is new ecosystem with possibly new sources of food. Let's start again by looking at this graph. We are working with our terrestrial groups, and so our first evolutionary adaptation were the limbs, our bony limbs, and all the groups that we're talking about from here on out have those bony limbs. The amphibians as a group are characterized by having an ectothermic metabolism, or we might call them cold-blooded, which means they get part of their body heat from the environment. Doesn't mean that they're exactly the same temperature as the environment. They're just getting part of their metabolic heat from their environment. Important thing to notice, their reproduction is still water dependent. They lay eggs in the water. A lot of amphibians have a tadpole-like larvae with a lateral line system. They have gills. They have fins. They're very similar to fish. And then that tadpole larvae goes through metamorphosis to a terrestrial adult form with 4 legs, air-breathing lungs, eardrums instead of a lateral line system. Some other traits for the amphibians, buccal pumping. Buccal pumping is when they open up their mouth, bring in air, close the mouth, and then raise the floor of the mouth up, and that forces air down into the lungs. A lot of amphibians can also absorb oxygen across their very thin, moist skin. They have a 3-chambered heart. With a 3-chambered heart, we get blood coming from the lungs, blood coming back from the body, and then we're pumping that oxygenated blood back out to the body, which does improve oxygenation and nutrient delivery over the 2-chambered heart, blood coming in from the lungs and body, blood going out of the hearts and fishes, of the heart of the fishes. For amphibian diversity, there are 3 major orders. There are the Anura, probably what a lot of us think of, the frogs and toads. A very small and somewhat obscure group, the Apoda, which include the caecilians. Right here, they kind of look worm-like. They've evolutionarily, secondarily lost their paired appendages. And then my favorite group, the salamanders. I think salamanders are cool. And then back to our diagram. So we have the limbs, we talked about the amphibians, and now we have the development of the amniotic egg, which changed the playing field completely. So the amniotes, all the organisms that are characterized by having an amniotic egg, are our first truly terrestrial group. Reproduction is no longer water dependent. And the amniotes include all the reptiles, all the birds, and all the mammals. They're also characterized, so in addition to the amniotic egg, by a desiccation-resistant skin. So skin that's thicker, is reinforced with keratin, which is a waterproof rubbery protein. So we're using that to make scales or our skin. Thoracic breathing. With the amphibians, buccal breathing, you bring air in, you move up your jaw, and you push air down into the lungs. With thoracic breathing, what we do is we increase the volume of our lungs, and that pulls air down into our lungs. It's much more efficient. Our kidneys are water conserving, very important in a terrestrial environment. And internal fertilization, no more spawning. We need to kind of deliver sperm to the eggs. So those are the important terrestrial adaptations that we see in the amniotes. Reptiles, major group of amniotic organisms. Reptiles are also ectothermic. So we talked about amphibians being ectothermic. Reptiles are ectothermic, absorbing heat from their environment. Now there are some exceptions. Some large and very active individuals like monitor lizards may be somewhat endothermic and produce most of their own metabolic heat. Their skin is specialized with scales, which is desiccation or drying out resistant and very tough and protected. For reptile diversity, we've got the group of the testudines, turtles and tortoises. Super cool if you haven't seen a shell of a turtle from the inside. It is the vertebrae and the ribs that are fused together to form that shell. They do not have teeth, so they've secondarily lost the teeth, but there is that hard beak for biting. Don't mess with a turtle. Squamata are the lizards and snakes. They are the largest, most diverse group of the extant, the living reptiles. They have some interesting adaptations in their skeleton, particularly what is called a kinetic skull, which has multiple jaw joints, making that skull very mobile. Think of a snake and its ability to open up that jaw and swallow its prey. Crocodiles, the crocodilia, crocodiles and alligators. An interesting thing about this group is, in this group we actually see the four-chambered heart that's very similar to our own. And of all the extant reptiles, living reptiles today, this group is probably the most closely related to the birds and the dinosaurs. And we can't forget the dinosaurs. Two main groups are the Ornithischia and the Saurischia. And there are other reptile groups that are extinct that I'm leaving out, but you'll read about them in your textbook. And they include the bird hip dinosaurs like Stegosaurus and the lizard hip dinosaurs. There's been a lot of debate. Are dinosaurs ectothermic or endothermic? There's some good evidence that at least some of them were endothermic. And an interesting thing about the dinosaurs is where their hind limbs are located. If you look at like a lizard, there's their body, their legs come out parallel to their body, whereas a dinosaur, the legs come directly down. It's an adaptation for movement and being able to bear increased body weight. Technically, the aves, the birds, are a reptile group, and they are probably a descent group of the dinosaurs. So in modern days, the birds are typically kept in the reptilia and thought of as a descent group of the dinosaurs. I find it convenient sometimes just to bring them out because they are such a diverse group today. They are endothermic. So of the amniotes that we've talked about, reptiles are mostly ectothermic, so are the amphibians. The aves, the birds, are an endothermic group. They make their own metabolic heat and they regulate their body temperature. They keep their body temperature in a fairly narrow metabolic range. The scales have been modified for feathers, which are an adaptation for flight, and they show a lot of other unique adaptations for flight. Things that actually decrease their density, such as honeycomb bones, bones with air spaces, any place they could hollow out. The bones, the feather shaft, are hollow and air-filled to decrease their density. Aerodynamic shape to the wings, large pectoral chest muscles, fused to fused breast and collarbone, and air sacs. Air sacs to reduce density, also reduction of organs to reduce the weight of their bodies. The birds are the largest group of the terrestrial vertebrates, the largest group of tetrapods, the largest group of amniotes. There are 10,000 species and 166 families and 28 orders. I included table 34.2, which gives you a summary. Honestly, I'm a chicken person, and I kind of keep it around there. But birds are fascinating with all their diversity and adaptations. Again, back to our chart. We're in the amniotes, the amniotic group, and now we're looking at our last derived trait, which is milk and hair. And that defines the mammals. You might have thought we would be defined by something more exciting, but no. Mammals are characterized by having mammary glands. That is unique to mammals. Hair, specialized teeth, and enlarged skull for an enlarged brain. Yes, mammals are also endothermic, but that is not unique to the mammal, so we don't consider that a defining trait. There are 3 orders of mammals, the monotremes, marsupials, and eutherians. So our monotremes are the duck-billed platypus, the echidna, marsupials, kangaroos, and the opossum. Eutherians are the placentals. And quickly summarizing these monotremes, their key trait, they actually lay eggs. And so that's why we don't call internal birth a trait for the mammals either, because the monotremes, the spiny echidna and the duck-billed platypus, lay eggs. Marsupials, though, do have the embryo that is nurtured for a brief period of time by a placenta. So a brief gestation, then the embryo finishes growing, and a brood pouch that's called a marsupium comes equipped with nipples so that the developing embryo can drink. And then there's the eutherians. Eutherians are characterized by the internal development, placenta, embryonic tissue. So the placenta itself is embryonic tissue, and it functions to facilitate transfer of food, oxygen, waste between mother and child. We'll come back to this group when we're talking about human evolution in our next lecture. So let's sum up with the tetrapods, our descent group of the lobe-finned fishes. Key derived traits in each group are related to the transition to a terrestrial habitat, so understand those. And the traits that allowed a complete transition to terrestrial life were first seen in the reptiles and include the amniotic egg, desiccation-resistant skin, thoracic breathing, and internal fertilization. And birds and mammals are descent groups of the reptiles. So I'll see you in our next lecture where we discuss humans.